Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, finish. Let's go.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Cole here on this chilly day in Brisbane, and welcome to episode 408 of the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. It's my absolute pleasure today to showcase in today's episode Clint Davis. Now, Clint is an entrepreneur with a passion for storytelling and a real commitment and purpose for preserving the past. Now, as the CEO and founder of Capsll Inc., which is now available, Clint empowers others to save their history and pass on their legacies. What an amazing concept and what a brilliant initiative for leaders everywhere. Now, Clint's love for the stories that make each individual unique stems from his 17-year career in radio and television broadcasting on 4 continents. Now, Clint is encouraging others to preserve their special memories and gather their once scattered memories into digital time capsules that can be shared privately with full user control. It is an amazing concept, the concept of time capsules being brought into a digital space. And as we know, in our social media world today, we've got memories that are just scattered everywhere. Some will be on Instagram, some will be on Facebook, some are on our phones, some are on our laptops. They're all over the place. And for us to be able to ensure that we can pass on our legacy and our history to the generations that come after us, I think Capsll is an amazing tool for us to be able to do that. So after a word from our sponsor, Think and Grow Business, please welcome Clint Davis to the podcast.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome Clint Davis. How are you, Clint?
I'm great, Tony. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who's going to spend some time listening to what I have to say. I used to take that for granted, but I don't anymore. So I appreciate your time.
And you've got a really amazing story. And we were just talking a little bit about you're the CEO and founder of the Capsll App, and it looks amazing, but of course there's always a journey to get to where you are now. So share with the listeners the Clint Davis story.
Yeah, wow. How long do we have, Tony? We've got a couple of weeks here, or what are we doing? It's so fascinating, you know. Once you've traveled a few countries and accomplished a couple of things, people love asking you for your story, and you always promise you're going to tell it in a short version, and you never quite get that right because there's so many details. But I guess the shortest version I can give you is I grew up in South Africa under apartheid, lived through that transition as a teen, young adult. So very interesting to see that, particularly in the light of what's going on politically nowadays. A lot of similarities. I guess humanity really does repeat itself. My wife and I left there in 2008. I was a radio host there in the largest station in South Africa, and that career continued into the countries that we moved to. We moved to Dubai. We lived there for 6 years, at which point generally people interrupt and go, "Tell me about Dubai." And happy to do that, but I'm still going on my story here, so let me carry on, because I know that you're going to want to know that I lived in Australia for 2 years as well, on the Goldie. Absolutely beautiful, miss it every day. Miss a solid coffee every day, became a real coffee snob there, and that's just hard to find in America, which is where I live now in Austin, Texas. Became an American citizen a month ago, so a very, very long journey to get that, but we're at home here, and I guess the mission really hasn't changed much. Still very focused on changing the world and making my life count for something. So here we find ourselves.
And fascinating stories. So let's talk very quickly about the app, because I know that there's so many areas that we're going to explore today. So talk to me about the background behind the Capsll app and what you're hoping to do with it.
Yeah, well, let me ask you something, Tony. Where do you keep your memories? Where do you keep your stuff that is important to you?
It's probably all backed up into the iCloud. The iCloud
Somewhere there,
somewhere there.
yeah.
Parts of it might be posted on Facebook, or some of it's on LinkedIn. So it's all over the place.
Yeah, it's all over. I know, and that is the problem. That is what I faced. And if you've got backups in the cloud, you're ahead of the majority. So well done on that. And we'll give you a gold star for that today, Tony, because
awesome,
it is.
thank you.
But we're going to work on a platinum level now.
But there's a challenge with that, because sometimes when the iPhone iCloud is not the world's most user-friendly interface to go back and find stuff. But also what I'm seeing is that there's a time limit sort of almost imposed on it. Some of it goes into archiving.
Isn't that surprising?
So on my phone, for example, I can only access from 2017 onwards at the moment. So I'm not sure whether it's something I've done or whether it's something that's automatically done. So I know that my photos are sitting in iCloud somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm just not quite sure how to get to them at the moment. So.
Yeah, totally understand that. And I've heard that from somebody with Google this week as well. Lost years and years of their photos. I don't know if they lost. I haven't looked into it, but it is difficult. The story really begins with the life that I've lived. And I've had so many opportunities that have come through radio. Got to do some really fun stuff. I was a high performance driving instructor for over a decade too. So just a lot of stories, a lot of things. But coupled with that, a lot of struggle. My wife and I make some big moves. It sounds glamorous that we've lived in all these countries. It was not. It was very difficult. Every move was done on pretty much a zero budget and really just faith steps, And so people don't see that. And what started really upsetting me, I guess it has to do with getting a little bit closer to that midlife stage. I'm 42 now. And I started thinking about my kids one day not knowing how I became the person I became. Because there is a striving within me to consistently become the best version of myself that I can be. Yeah. And I realize that they don't know those stories. They don't know the struggles. And I would hate for them to look at successful mom and dad and go, oh, well, this is easy, and get all this entitlement about them. I want them to know how we became these people. And adversely, I thought about my grandfather, who was an orphan and became a very high-powered CEO. And I really want to know his stories now that I'm old enough to appreciate them, but they are nowhere. The truth is that we lived in a world before where people would write memoirs and biographies and at very least leave shoeboxes full of photos. But now in the digital age, we have failed to save our stuff. One, as you so aptly pointed out, in a place that is collated into how we want it or where we can find it. And secondly, with the ability to pass that on to future generations along with our insights and life lessons that we have. And so as this started to bug me more and more, I actually set out to record a private podcast to save these stories. And I realized that I wanted to be able to add pictures and video. I wanted to be able to do just more than what was being offered to me on that platform. And I realized that many other people would probably want the same. And so Capsll was born off the back of the pandemic. Well, off the back, let me rather say. It was born in the early parts or late parts of 2020, or early 21, late 2020. And basically what we're doing is we have created an app that launches in March 21st, so 3/21. And this gives people digital time capsules. In each one, you can upload audio, video, pictures. You can record your stories in first person if you want, or you can upload media. But each digital capsule, you can then share with only the people that you want to see that particular one.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can share it on a public feed if you like, if you think it'll inspire others like cancer survivors and the likes. But most importantly, you can share it with just the people you want to see that one, or you can keep it completely privately to yourself. And then the real kicker is that the people that you've shared those capsules with, those legacy contacts, when your Earth story comes to an end, they will gain permission to pass that content on another layer. And so that can then go to their grandkids and so on and so on and so on. And so we're really solving a couple of problems here. We're building a brand new platform. This has not been done to scale before. And it's going really well, and we're very excited about the human aspect of how this can both reinstate the meaning behind digital content, which we've lost by, taking 30 pictures to find the perfect one to post. Yeah. So that's the one big, audacious goal we want. And then the other side of it is the human element, in that when you look back on your story, you find value in yourself, and then recognize other people have a story too, and you find value in them too. I think we can really impact the fabric of society with something like this.
I think it's such an amazing concept, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it come to life, because I'm always reminded, one of my relatives once said to me, Tony, we're only ever one generation away from losing our history.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And you walk around graveyards and cemeteries and you see these old, neglected tombstones of people, and you sort of sit back and you think, I wonder who they were, I wonder what they did. There's a cemetery in Windsor here in Sydney that's got more curls in it than any other cemetery I'm imagining in Australia. Yeah. And each one of those is a person and a story that I know very, very little about. So this has got such a great capacity. And one of the things that I really love about it, Clint, I know I don't want to talk about this the whole session, but I love the fact that the public feed is like an optional extra that you can do. The focus is on that digital capsulization of your history.
Yeah, we've been very particular about how we've built this app. We've really wrestled with it from the user point of view. We have wrestled with it from what we would like to use and how we would like to be treated. Now, I will tell you that Capsll is going to be a massive company. We understand that, and there's a lot of revenue that will flow through the company, and there's a lot of good we want to do with that. But the truth of the matter is that our main goal is not the money. Our main goal is to change the fabric of humanity. Yeah. And so when we look at building something that we want to use, we look at things like a public feed creates community. It creates a sense of movement. It keeps me engaged in finding inspiration. If we think about terminally ill people who want to leave their story behind, or need a little bit more hope, will they be able to find somebody who's gone through what they're going through on the public feed and be inspired? What about the military aspect of this? What about the seniors? What about artists that can control their own content and release their own stuff? What about kids who don't have parents or orphans, and instead of a life of destitution or crime, they can find inspiration on a public feed like that where it's wholesome? But it goes beyond that, because we also are giving every user complete ownership of their content. Now that sounds really strange, but the truth is, when you upload your content to many of these platforms, you no longer own it.
Yeah.
And not only do you not own it anymore, but to actually get it, if you wanted to get a deceased loved one's content from, say, any other platform, say, Facebook, they'll memorialize a page for you, but they won't give you the content. Yeah. If you go all the way up to Dropbox, you need a court order to actually get that content. And so we are doing complete user-owned content, no advertising, no user data tracking. We won't track you across the internet or anything like that. So we're not interested in what you have. Your private capsules are checked by AI. So we will not open your private capsules and invade your privacy unless, you report it for going against community guidelines or whatever. Then we have an obligation to. But we are really trying to put your content back in your hands, because it should be yours and you should own it,
Yeah. That is just amazing.
And then, sorry, Tony, last thing, or else I get in trouble if I don't do this. I get in trouble, but there's no likes and no comments. So you no longer get validated based on the content that you put up. 0 likes. The dopamine hits you get will come from the stories you remember. I'm just slightly passionate about this, Tony. I'm slightly passionate about it.
I can see that. I can see
but
that.
But this is where we're going. Yeah.
But I love it because, I mean, we're in a society where we take more photos than ever before, but we're not sitting and appreciating the photos and ourselves, and the validation that we get from the photos isn't from ourselves. It's how many likes that we got, or how many people looked at it, or what our reach was, or did that create a lead for my business? And we've just totally changed the landscape for what genuinely photography was back.
Yes.
You know, it's just, I think it's such a great thing. And it's obviously, I can see your purpose. So let's move away from the app, even though it's still connected with the app. So obviously your purpose is around the app and ancestry and whatnot. Where was that driven from for you?
I think honestly, there's 2 aspects to that. The one is that I realize how many of my own stories I forget.
Yeah.
And the neuroscience behind what we're building is very interesting, because it's the same as when you sit with a friend that you were at school with and you've forgotten these stories. And just over a coffee, let's use coffee because we have to. Australia, I'm tasting that good coffee, Tony. I'm tasting it, you know. So let's use coffee. You sit across a coffee from a friend and you go, you know, I would never have remembered this story had we not gotten together to have a coffee at the Sava, you know? So it's like that moment where you go, wow, a memory I've forgotten. How could I forget that? Let me put it in Capsll so I don't forget it again, you know, because I want to remember my life. I want to remember how I've journeyed. I want to remember that I've grown. We spend so much time looking forward to the next thing, the next success, the next moment. What about the life you've lived? There's so much value in there, not only for you, but it should be valuable for others too, because there are lessons that only you have learned. And so there was a piece of that where I want to remember my own stories, and then really just to leave a legacy. I think legacy is very important. And when you consider that a lot of our history is starting to be dictated to us now, well, with something like this, you can be the history maker. You tell us what it was like. You tell your story. And there's no judgment on the app for the story you tell, because nobody can. Nobody has access to comment or dislike or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's incredible. So the resilience feature about telling your life story. So I was just thinking in relation to my own personal story with my mum and dad. I lost my dad when I was 21. I lost mum just over 10 years ago now. And there are so many times that I just want to sit down with either of them and just listen to them, because, you know, when you're 21, you haven't really sort of marked your place in the earth, on the world yet, let alone wanting to hear other people's sort of theories and support. So there's a real resilience in creating that life story, not just for yourself, but for other people. What sort of, like, how are you going to work with people on your app to help them with that resilience, or that perseverance of continually doing and putting their story out there? Yeah,
so there's an aspect that's I don't like the word user. It's just difficult because that's what people understand. I don't like that word, but let's say capsulers, or the community we're creating, or let's just use users for the time being until we come up with a better one. But there's a user aspect and there's a business aspect to this, right? So and they kind of interlink in what we would call, when we build tech, something that needs to be sticky, right? So sticky is like, you want to pick it up, you want to look at it, you want to, you know, engage with it. The back end of being sticky is that you want it to be sticky for the right reason. You don't want it to be sticky because there's a dopamine hit that is just going to hurt you down the line, and we can see the health effects from things like Facebook and all those things. And honestly, like, honor to Facebook, we can give honor where honor's due, in the sense that they created a platform that would not allow us to be thinking about building something like this had they not done that, right?
Yeah.
However, ethically we disagree. And that's a whole nother conversation. But my point being that it's our job to make it valuable and sticky. on that end so that people want to use it. It's also our job, though, to help users create that content. And so from my years of radio and interviewing people and learning how to be engaging and building stations and programs and all this thing, I know that it's difficult to tell a story sometimes. And so we've actually built coached storytelling aspects into the app that help you understand how to tell a fuller story. And so, Tony, if I said to you, are you married? Are you married, Tony? I'm assuming.
Yep.
Every successful guy is married, so, just assuming. But if I say to you, tell me how you met your wife, you'd give me the broad brushstrokes, and, so-and-so. But if I said, Tony, you're about to record a story of how you met your wife to leave for your kids and grandkids one day. When you tell your story, speak about a couple of major world events that were going on in the time. Set the tone. Speak about where you are as you record this and what's going on. Now, when you tell your story, what was on the radio when you were driving to that first date? Where did you go? What did you do? Did you order food that was the same or different? Or maybe she ordered something you hate. Maybe you ordered the same thing. At what moment did you think, wow, this is interesting, this could be the one? Or did you think the opposite? And then how many days did you wait before you called? Now remember, whatever else you want to add into that story, remember to make it full. And two things are going to happen. We go back to the neuroscience that when you're telling the story, other memories will come to mind. And so note those down. And the other side is that you're going to have a fuller story to leave as you move forward.
Yeah, that's incredible. And even just as you were walking through that, I'm walking through my story.
So am I. I know.
And this is the power that we see in storytelling. And one of the things that just grabbed me was the storytelling for businesses. So at the moment, I've got a bit of an addiction to some of these, what I call historians. My background's retail. I spent 30 years in retail. And so I'm seeing these historians on YouTube documenting the last days of Kmart or Sears.
Oh, wow.
So they go into stores. I think Kmart's down to like 3 stores in the US from their peak, which was like 3,000. These guys have been doing it for years. So as stores have been closing, they go in and they document it. And so to me, that's real history. But then thinking back to my life in some of the retail companies I worked in, a lot of that historical photo that, whether it was from the store opening when it opened in 75 to, major works that were happening or seasonal events or how people, all of that gets lost on an ongoing basis as new managers come in and they clean out what they see as just crap and clutter. And so we're actually, in a lot of those businesses, losing that historical context through, the concept of crap and clutter. So I can see a real benefit in the app for businesses to be able to just say, well, let's put our story there. It's always going to be there. It's there in a digital capsule, so people can always go back to the 70s and see what people were wearing or what the specials were. We get a real kick out of seeing old catalogues from the 70s.
Absolutely. All those price tags. If only they'd come back. If only we could spend only that. Yeah.
Imagine real estate and, when development. There is such a need for what it is that you're doing. So I really do applaud you for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about storytelling and leaders. So this is a story that, a continuing story that I talk to leaders about. The ability for them to be able to inspire and capture people's energies through storytelling. And for a lot of leaders, that's completely foreign to them. They don't want to big note themselves. They don't want it to be all about them. They struggle to come up initially with what some of those stories may look like. So if you were sitting down with a group of 4 or 5 leaders and asking them to listen and understand and become aware of the power of storytelling in their ability to engage their troops, what are some of the things that you'd be talking through with them?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's such a broad topic, but it's one that we need to narrow down in a sense because it seems so overwhelming most of the time, right? And so you kind of either abdicate that to somebody else or you just ignore it and whatever's going to be will be. The truth is, as we all know, if you don't dictate the culture will be dictated for you. And so for me, it really comes down to culture, and storytelling is the backbone of culture, right? And so I think the one thing that has been so good for me is to reflect on the struggle. And when you reflect on the struggle and you do it in a healthy way, not in a victimized mentality, then you come to realize, one, that you made it through that, but two, that you could have been taken out at any point. And this is true because this instills a form of humility in you, that when you're on this journey of trying to build something, trying to do something, or if it's even just trying to survive, maybe you're on the breadline and you're trying to survive. The truth of the matter is that there are lessons to learn in struggle that you cannot learn anywhere else. And the leaders that come out with stories that are worth speaking about and that really encourage their troops are the ones that have managed to wrestle with the struggles of their life and go, okay, but this is the character it built to me. And out of that, this is the character I want to share with you, so that even though you have your own struggles in your life, I don't want you to have to go through mine. And we can learn that way. And so I think there's a radical humility that needs to take place. I also think that there's a radical ownership. And when we get it wrong, we need to own that. And much of our story as our staff carries on down the line should be, you know what? He may not get it right all the time. He's a bold leader, hopefully. But when he doesn't get it right, he's humble enough to go, I don't know, guys, got that wrong. Help me out. But the storytelling aspect, I think if I could just surmise, it would be, I think there's massive need for a new type of leader in the world. It's starting to emerge. With all the changes and all the things that have happened over the last 3 years. I think a big part of that, though, is those that are willing to be more open, more real, more candid about their struggles are the ones that are going to be able to connect better on a EQ level, and that is going to count for everything. So there's two types of leaders, right, when it comes to marketing. The one is like, hey, it's me, me, me. It's all about me. Look at how successful I am. Do this and you're going to have millions. That's a disconnect for me. It's like, I don't know your story. I don't know your journey. I don't know how you got there. I don't know your struggles. You're making it look like fairy tales and unicorns. There's another type of leader that goes, I understand that a lot of the rhetoric needs to be about me because people buy into people before they buy into products. But can the about me part just be humble and real and raw so that we can relate? And I think that's very different.
Very much so. Great advice. And that humility, vulnerability, empathy, all of these traits that we're starting to really focus on in the leadership world is so critical moving forward. As is, and more so when we think about the remote teams that we now have.
Absolutely.
And you founded your company fully remote during COVID. So tell me that story, because that in itself is something to be congratulated on.
Yeah, thank you. We are very proud of the fact that we've been able to do that. We've been founding for over a year. Honestly, I don't know that Capsll would exist if it weren't for the pandemic. So, I think there's a lot of good that has come out of the pandemic, as tragic as it has been, for those who have seen the opportunity and gone for it. And the truth is that when you see an opportunity and you decide to go for it, if you're really in it, if you really think this is going to change the world, if you really think this is worthwhile, remote or not remote, nothing should stop you, right? You just got to learn. You got to get around it. Now, I will be honest that I lucked out a little bit in that the two co-founders I brought in are friends. Hadn't seen them for years and years and years. And the one is in Bali, who oversees our dev team there, which is actually an absolute godsend. And the other is in Colorado, and I'm in Austin, Texas. So I find that as a leader, the number one thing I've had to do, as you already so rightly pointed out, is learn how to be empathetic over a screen. How you have to be really connected. You have to take a few minutes before you get on that call to actually gather yourself, so you don't bring all your junk in and throw it across at other people on the screen, which you're not going to be able to walk up to them at a water cooler later and go, hey, sorry, I was a bit harsh on that. They're not getting your sentiment. They're not getting necessarily your full body language. Most of us are not even wearing pants, if we're honest. Come on, So I think that I lucked out a little bit, but truly the next batch of leaders that are able to engage empathetically remotely will be the ones that are successful.
Yeah, it's so true.
And there are challenges.
Yeah.
Remotely it's challenging.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, when we come out of this, when we finally see the back end of this pandemic, I think there's a number of challenges that leaders are going to need to face with re-engaging and reconnecting, and in many ways, new ways of working and new ways of leading. So that openness, that growth mindset that we often want, that we talk about, is going to really come to the fore. And if leaders can't adapt and adjust and mould themselves into the leadership way of the future, I think some of them are going to unfortunately struggle. So
yeah, that's completely true. I think, Tony, I would just add to that I think the role of the CEO in particular in going back to the grassroots of hiring, being involved in that process, is so key. It's been on my mind a lot lately, but it's so true, because you're hiring, if you have remote staff, they need to know your heart, they need to meet you in person, they need to know, and you need to know that you can trust them. And so I really am wrestling at the moment with this thing of, as you grow and as you scale, how do you stay connected to the people you're hiring?
Yeah, it's a challenge. And during my corporate career, there were some CEOs or managing directors that people just truly loved because of that connection piece. They would make the time when they came and visited your stores, for example.
Yes.
And their presence was there. It was powerful. It was intentional. And then there were other CEOs that would walk around like they were the blessed royals, and they wouldn't talk to people, or that they would only talk to set people. And it was really noticeable, and their connection with their team and their people, and subsequently their results, were never as great as the ones that really were powerful in their presence. So, Clint, who's inspired you in your journey?
Yeah, I listened to your podcast, Tony, and I've heard you ask this question, and I was thinking, what is my answer to this question? I wanted to be a good guest, and I wanted to be prepared. The truth is probably twofold, and I know a lot of people are going to, whatever, but there's two answers. The one is, and this is not arrogant at all, I promise you, but I just don't know how else to say it. I believe at some point you have to become the hero of your own story.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's something healthy in drawing inspiration from your own past and what you've come through, to recognize that you're still here, you're still doing it. The moment you make another person a hero, you are so susceptible to realizing how human they are. And that falls away, and comes disillusionment knocking on the door.
Yeah.
So I think if you could do that, that's really great. The other side to it, though, is if I have to choose someone, and this is why I say it might be strange for listeners, but my degree is actually in theology, and so I'd have to go with Jesus Christ on that one. And we're a story-based company. What story has stood a length of time and inspired such a movement? Whether you're a person of that faith or not is kind of irrelevant at that point, right? This is incredible to think the amount of print, the amount of storytelling, the amount of buy-in, engagement every week. It's amazing to me that we're 2,000 years on from that, and this story is still going.
Yeah.
And actually longer, because you take Israel and you're much, then you're 8,000, 9,000 years in. So crazy.
Yep. So both, it's interesting, the journey that you're the hero of your own journey, because that is such an inspiration for, it should be an inspiration for just about everyone. And even, the journey that of Christ in the Bible is a journey that people buy into. But the journey for ourselves, that hero's journey, I've always believed that should be part of our own inspiration. That's what gets us out of bed every day. And when we lose that is when we start to drift, when we start to hit the snooze button, when we start to think, well, what's today going to bring? That's when we start to get into that same old scenario that people get into. Yeah. But it's our journey in life. It's seeing where we came from, seeing the courage that we've shown in various situations, and using that to propel us forward. So
yes.
So great answer. great answer.
Thank you. Have you had that answer before? Is that the first time you had that one? Or?
I think there's been hints at that along the way.
Yeah, nobody owned it, Tony. Nobody owned it. Call them back. Let's get them on a group call here. Let's sort them out.
So talk me through your relationship with failure.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, relationship is such an interesting word to tie to failure, isn't it? What an interesting dynamic. It's almost a dichotomy because you don't want to keep a failing relationship in your life. I don't have one, I don't think.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I feel that hardship and struggle is where often people will define that as failure because a particular task failed or a particular project failed. It's just not. You learn so much from it. If you can look at it and you can learn and you can move on, is that really failure? I don't know. I think it's school fees. Now, if you allow failure to rule you, then failure becomes like the school teacher who's always pointing out what you've done wrong only.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because you'll get stuck. You'll get stuck on that. So I hold things that have had the perception from the outside of failure. Right? Because many will look at something and go, oh, he failed at that. The truth is they don't know what you learned and they don't know what you were trying to do. I mean, if somebody tries to change the world and it's a big scale thing and it doesn't work out, did they fail? Or at the very least, did they change themselves and they want the world to be a better place? Or maybe one or two staff. So I think failure happens when you give up on it. That's when it happens. And I haven't given up yet. So, you know, join me on the not giving up, then you won't fail, you know.
Okay, so conversely, what's your relationship like with success?
Still learning, Tony, still learning. Still got to be successful. I can't, you know. Again, I think it's very similar, you know. I look at my radio career and, you know, I got to do radio to just over 5 million listeners in 4 different countries. And that's quite rare to have a radio career like that. It means that you're reinventing and breaking in every single time. It's hard enough to break into that industry once, but 4 times I consider myself very privileged, and I needed more and more humility as I went along the way. Funnily enough, where at the beginning you need more and more ego because you don't get in if you don't have it. And you learn hard lessons that way. You treat people poorly and you take people for granted. And I did all of that stuff. And if you learn from that, then that's great. So I think my success was not in the radio career. And I can speak about this on any topic and anything I've done, but the success was not in the career. The success was in the person that I became after I learned that I don't want to be like that in order to achieve that success. I would rather be myself and achieve a different kind of success, but actually grow in character, grow in empathy, grow in connection with people, be a better person. And I think what's funny is if you take that journey, then you come to a place where when you finally hit the thing that you know is your thing, which is what Capsll is for me, that you know this is the way you're going to change the world. This is the big thing. Despite what you thought before about other things, you kind of thought, I don't know if it's that thing, but it could be. When you hit the thing and you know, then you've got all of that success of character within yourself. And your previous perceived successes don't matter because it's only what you can bring to the table right now as a person.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's more about who you become.
I think so.
As opposed to what you've achieved. And
I think so.
What car you're driving, where do you live, you know.
Yeah.
So many people put their material stuff around success. I must be successful, I'm driving a nice car.
Yeah.
But I'm absolutely miserable because I hate doing what I'm doing.
100%. So what you find as well is then, you know, you're driving that car, you're living that house or whatever, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. That's great. But what you really want to do is have both, right? You want to have wealth in your hands because you know that you'll steward it well and that you'll have the character to steward it well and all of these things. I'm a little tired of seeing, and not all billionaires are like this, but I'm a little tired of seeing billionaires who are like, well, I give to this charity and that charity and that charity. Yeah, thanks, man, but where's your empathy? Like, are you connected with humanity? Because you're a human and you live in humanity. So are you connected, or are you just off there and going, well, you know, I give my tax deductible stuff to charity? I mean, come on, like, we've got to do better as people, right? We need new kinds of leaders. We really do.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. 100% truth. So what's the vision? for yourself and Capsll?
Yeah, well, vision is one day I could do the Braveheart speech. One day, lying in my bed, I will know that I came to fight on this day. I didn't run, But the vision really is, the big overarching vision is to change the intent behind digital content. If we, exactly what you said earlier, instead of just flicking through pictures, we want people to remember why they were there, why they recorded that memory, who they were with. That connectedness is so important. We want people to be able to leave their life legacies, because you don't have to be some massive hero of something to have a legacy. This is the mistake people make. There are just under 8 billion people in the world. Not a single one has exactly the same life path. Not a single one. The same decisions, the same failures, the same successes, the same opportunities, the same responses. There's no way, not a single person in the world has exactly the same pattern. That makes you unique. That means that your story has insights that others can learn from. That means that your story should be saved. It means that your life is valuable. And that's really where it comes from, the big overarching thing of changing the world intent behind digital formatted content, which is what shifted with the likes of Facebook and those spaces that made it so ethereal. We want to bring meaning back, but then on a smaller level, I always go back to the number one rule I learned in radio. Speak to the one person. Just the one. I'd do shows and I'd have one person late at night call in because they're lonely and they're listening and you are their world. I want you to understand that you are somebody's world. So everything we create in the app, we think of the one person. We don't think of the masses. We think of the one person. What does it mean to that one person? And if we, however many lives we affect, Tony, that's great. That's great. One life, is it worth it? It's the Schindler's List thing, right? Are 2 lives worth it? Are 5 lives worth it? Will we go through a year of founding and all of this for 10 lives? Our answer has to be yes. It has to be.
Yeah. Great story.
Yeah.
I am so looking forward to seeing this app come to life, Clint. And I just really want to thank you for your time today. And how can people connect with you?
Yeah, great. Awesome. I was so wrapped up in what we were talking about, I would have forgotten that too. So glad you did. Well, firstly, please, I'm not sure time of recording. Obviously the app will be out 3/21, so 3/21, can't miss it. And so please get on there. What we're asking you to do is we're not trying to throw you onto another platform. We're asking you to trust us. We recognize that trust has been broken on many of these platforms. We recognize we need to rebuild your trust. We are doing everything we can to do that. So please try it. There's a free version that you can try. It's enough to actually save your life if you want to. And then there's subscription models for deeper engagement. So that's the one thing. If we haven't launched, then capsules.app is where you can join the waitlist, or if you just want to know, you can go there now, capsll.app. And then we're still on Instagram at the moment because that's where people are. We won't be on there forever, but capsule.app on Instagram. And then if you'd like to reach out to me directly along the lines of business, investment, speaking engagements, and the like, then LinkedIn, Clint Davis on LinkedIn, and you'll find me there. So, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And I'll make sure that all of those are in the show notes. Clint, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for investing in today's leaders.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it, and thank you, everybody who's given us the time to listen.
And now, it's time for Tony's 2 cents.
So how cool was that? How cool was that? What a great idea. And it's what a great idea for leaders. So what did you take away from the discussion today with Clint? Now, one of the things that really stood out to me was the development of Capsll App has certainly been a journey. And it's a journey that's been driven by a strong purpose and a strong ethics in the way that they wish to impact the world. Purpose and ethics aligned to drive this business journey. And for you as a leader, what does that mean for you, and how can you make an impact? Because at the end of the day, every leader should aim for impact. And they should aim for impact and connection. And there's no better way to do that through stories and imagery. Yet the history of many businesses gets lost. The history of many businesses get lost. And it gets lost on a regular basis. We often will see cleanups and shake-ups in corporate life. And with that, a quest to move forward. And we unintentionally trash the memories of the past. Now, every journey is unique and every journey deserves to be acknowledged. We can enhance our businesses and careers by the learnings from some of the stories that are bound in the history of ourselves or the business in which we operate. Embrace them. Stop pushing them aside. And especially stop pushing them aside in the pursuit of what we may call present day perfectionism. So thanks, Clint, for coming on the Today's Leader podcast. I know that you've got an amazing product, and I wish you every success. And as always, Clint's details are in the show notes. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. We really are driving a leadership revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Today's Leader is a collective, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Mastermind. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. Don't forget, wherever you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye.